Welcome back to Degenerate Dialogues, episode Schrodinger's Cat, Part 2. Spoiler, the cat is alive, screaming, and sitting on the soundboard.
Also, if you thought the tech issues were bad in part 1, wait until you hear the mixer cut out like it was ghosting us mid-sentence.
Nothing says professional podcast like a guest calmly dropping wisdom while we sound like we're calling from prison phones.
But hey, it's still David S. Schwartz, still dropping psychedelic insight, and still way too good for the circus we call a podcast.
Let's pick up where we left off before the cats file a noise complaint.
So, hypothetically, Dave, if Ashley takes mushrooms and decides that she's now a raccoon, what's your preferred advice? Roll with it or call pest control?
I mean, it kind of depends. How recently did she take the mushrooms? Is she still actively tripping? Or is this
She's tripping balls right now. She doesn't even know what left leg looks like at this point.
Well, so now you're talking about like trip sitting, right? And what should somebody do if a friend is, struggling through a psychedelic experience? I'm not a trip sitter. And this is exactly why, is because I don't know. You're on mushrooms. You think you're a raccoon. I don't fucking know what you should do. My advice to anyone is like lay down, close your eyes, breathe, maybe change the music, maybe eat a piece of fruit. Don't go outside unless it's like your fenced in backyard where you feel safe. People need to learn how to trip. But once they're tripping, it's like kind of between you and the medicine.
And that's kind of why, yes, that's an absolute degenerate curveball question. I'm not going to lie. I had to throw it in there. But no, your answer was 100% right. I love that you first and foremost said, I'm not a trip sitter. That is the best answer that you could have come up with, because at the end of the day, the trip sitters, the shamans and shit like that, those are completely different people than your therapist. They will never be able to describe what else is going on in your life. They are there for that reason. If that's what you're looking for is a trip sitter, buddy, I don't even know where to find that. Start hitting up Craigslist. I'm sorry. I truly don't know.
And that's a very potentially dangerous thing, like there are wonderful people who are there to help sit. I know one personally who I would be willing to recommend to somebody under the right circumstances. I'm not going to mention their name, but I've known more who I wouldn't trust to watch my dog. And there's a lot of, and so beyond the people who I think are just kind of incompetent or misguided or misinformed, there are also those who are like actually dangerous and actually predatory and have actually taken advantage of people when they are in an incredibly compromised state. So this isn't all love and light. There's a lot of darkness that people need to be very, very wary of. So just as an overall caveat, I would say there's an absolute difference as well between a trip sitter and a shaman. Shamanism is something very, very, very different. A trip sitter is more somebody who is there to kind of just make sure you're safe. Neither of those people are a therapist. And it's often not the case that psychedelic-assisted therapy is talk therapy while under the influence of psychedelics. That is happening with MDMA. And MDMA ran into a major obstacle when the FDA declined their application for approval. But psychedelic-assisted therapy is what happens before and what happens after the trip. The trip is the trip. There are, unfortunately, any number of therapists out there who are involved in this work who believe themselves to be like the 21st century American capitalist version of a shaman. And it's like, you're not. And it kind of disgusts me that people think of themselves that way. There are people who believe, there are therapists involved in this work who I've spoken to, who believe that we as therapists belong to some priestly class in society and are the keepers of some sacred wisdom. And it's like, get off your high horse. Relax.
Something tells me the horse is actually high too. But I'm gonna rapid fire a couple of these at you, and by all means, don't dumb down your response, please. So, what's weirder to you, Dave? Someone using psychedelics for spiritual growth, or someone spending $400 to sit in a rage room smashing old fax machines? Because I've done both.
Well, $400 seems weird to me. Is that really how much a rage room costs?
When I said I did both, I hosted my own rage room, so Ashley can attest to how much it cost.
I've never done it. I've been curious. I've heard that there have been studies that show there are no actual benefits to the rage room in terms of alleviating any symptoms of anger or depression. In fact, might actually increase the intensity of negative affect. I'd be interested in doing it. I have to say, though, that the psychedelics are still weirder just because the psychedelic experience is so profoundly weird. But that's also one of the things that's so beneficial about it.
Absolutely. No, I truly thought that was hilarious because I cannot explain how much money and things that we have had to replace, whether it's drywall, whether it's dishes. But no, I mean, to your point, absolutely. Like, these things are not necessarily making us better. At the end of the day, I think of it as kind of like an alcohol or something like that. Is if you're in a bad mood and you do it, you're just going to deepen that mood. If you're in a good mood and you do it, hell, you might heighten it. I don't know. I've never actually smashed it because I wanted to and I felt happy doing it. I've only ever smashed it because I felt like it was my only escape. And I recently read something online that actually said if beating it up was worth it, it would have worked by now. And I think that your response to that was more than appropriate. Do you think psychedelics could fix road rage? Or would Atlanta just become Mario Kart with real cars?
I'm not a proponent of this idea that all the world needs is for everybody to be on mushrooms. I just don't think that that's how it works. I think that if anything, psychedelics have more of the potential to sort of magnify what's already in there, and that could be disastrous. So, like, we look at like the Aztec culture. You know what I mean? They supposedly used psilocybin in their rituals, but they also slaughtered thousands and thousands and thousands of people, human sacrifice as a result of the influence of psilocybin. So is that a problem with the psilocybin, or again, it's this interaction between the medicine and an individual psyche? So no, I don't think at all that all you need to do is give more people mushrooms. It's like the people who are called, the people who want to seek it out, they'll find it and should have access to it. But it's certainly not something that should necessarily be encouraged for those who don't have any frame of reference for it.
This resonates with me for a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is because I don't deal with the same mental illness that my partner deals with, Andy here. And so for me, I am a huge proponent of the movement of all types, right? Alt medicine, mental health, all of those things. I'll always promote anything that can help benefit another person. But I think there's two ends to that, right? Like, you can be mentally not well enough to do it, but I also think there's a spectrum of you're doing very well and maybe you can open a door that you shouldn't open because you're doing well. And I can say that from experience, obviously not diving into it, but I think there's kind of a spectrum on both ends. So it's really interesting that you say that. And I feel like that's why it's so important that we bring this into some form of therapy, because you need to know the right route to go, and it's not going to work for everybody. It's not a one-hit wonder.
Right. And I think somebody besides Joe Rogan who doesn't know really anything about like addiction, I can't listen to him anymore unless Graham Hancock is his guest. Then I'll tune in. You guys know Graham Hancock? That's a whole nother episode. But I heard him like encourage somebody who's in recovery from serious drug and alcohol addiction to try psychedelics because it's not the same, man. It's like, bro, you don't know what you're talking about. not everybody needs to use psychedelics. Not everybody is going to benefit from it.
Okay, now Dave, I gotta ask you because this one hit home hella fucking hard for me. I'm not gonna lie. As someone who realized that I am personally not an alcoholic, I was someone who was on all the wrong medication and had no coping mechanisms. I personally can drink like a gentleman today. I'm sitting here sipping on my second old fashioned day. I'm perfectly fine. However, I do know, and I have a very close friend of me who was on meth for about 4 or 5 years. And I've learned a lot about, in my readings, I've learned a lot about the addiction remedies that psilocybin may even predict for some people. But at the same time, I sit here and I think about my friend that I've known since 8 years old, and I don't want to think about him getting tripped out on something. I don't want to think about him getting anything. I don't want to think about anything other than, dude, just live your, be happy, please.
Right.
And to this day, he is one friend of mine who I discuss a lot about this with, who seems to have had good experiences with psilocybin, but it still freaks me out today.
There's just so much individual variability. And a person's got to kind of come to their own decision when it comes to how they want to be in recovery or what they want the relationship with drugs and alcohol to be. But the idea that somebody should be encouraged to experiment with psychedelics because it is not a threat to their ongoing recovery is just utter nonsense.
100% agreed on that. Yeah. I mean, like, dude, if you're already living your life without any substances, please just, if anybody is listening to this going through something like that or any type of addiction, I don't care what it may be, if you're already vibing without it, keep vibing, dude, because you are winning life right now. I deal with this in so many more ways than you could ever imagine. And if you're vibing without it, keep vibing without it. That's all I've got to say there. So if you had to choose national legalization of psychedelics tomorrow or free therapy for everyone, what does more good faster?
Removing prohibition against psilocybin, but not because of necessarily the mental health benefits, but because of the harm done by prohibition in terms of like criminality.
Okay, you threw me a curveball as I was throwing you curveballs. I did not expect that answer from a therapist, if I'm being 100% honest, because as a huge proponent of therapy on my own end, I've done it since I was 16. It took a couple years. Honestly, I've done it for much longer, but 16 is whenever I found the therapist that worked for me. And to this day, 12 years later, I still deal with the same person because he has made a difference in my life. That being said, I think therapy, would be incredible, but there are a lot of things that make it a whole lot cheaper today. You're saying that the decriminalization, the removing this veil, if you will, uncertainty of just basically what's going on in the psychedelic world might be even more beneficial. If I just want to make sure I heard you right.
I'm coming at it from a harm reduction approach, right? That's sort of my philosophy when it comes to drugs, harm reduction. For some people, that means don't do it at all. It's too dangerous, right? But if we're going to talk about harm reduction, we have to talk about what is harm. So when it comes to drugs that are prohibited, one of the major harms of those drugs has to do with the legal system's ability to do harm to people by throwing them in jail. And then the
Very
subsequent traumas that result from that and the way that people's lives are upended and destroyed because of draconian drug laws. I'm not saying that everybody should go out and do a bunch of drugs if they were all decriminalized. I'm not even necessarily saying that all drugs should be decriminalized. But if you're asking what reduces harm in society, removing the prohibition against psilocybin, in my opinion, reduces a significantly greater harm than offering access to therapy. Because if you offered free therapy to everybody, I don't know that the numbers of people utilizing therapy would increase dramatically. In the same way that if you made heroin legal tomorrow, I don't believe the numbers of people doing heroin would increase dramatically. So the people who aren't going to go to therapy aren't going to go to therapy even if it were free. So that's where I get my answer from.
That honestly makes more sense than I thought it was going to make. Yeah. I mean, honestly, both are pipe dreams. You know, one's blocked by Congress, the other by Blue Cross Blue Shield. But at the end of the day, it's like, I full-heartedly agree. I think, and in my eyes, that makes more sense as well because, I mean, like I said, it's changed my life in ways that I only wish I could describe to certain people. But at the same time, as I do not have the professional capacity to explain to these people. All I have is my own personal anecdotes. And I think that it's changed a lot of people's perceptions, even like my parents per se. But that doesn't mean that my parents are going to try it.
Right.
But exactly to your point, I don't know the last time that either of my parents went to therapy. And I think if it were 100% free, not that they care about money, they probably still want to do it today. So no, I full-heartedly agree with that statement. I see where you're coming from. I like that. I dig that. Where do you think psychedelics will be in 10 years, Dave? Extreme medicine, corporate wellness retreats, or still stuck in illegal bad trip stigma?
I think there's going to be just kind of like more of everything. I think that there's going to be there's going to be more people who know how to access it. There's going to be more, corporate retreats or like, party at your mom's friend's house in the suburb and, like boomers are going to be doing it. And like, I don't know in 10 years, there's going to be this like capitalist corporate takeover that I'm really worried about. I think that's way too soon, but I do think there are going to be a lot more people who have been able to have access to it. Whether that changes anything about the way society is structured, I don't think we're going to see that sort of change in 10 years. I think it needs to be a much longer timeline.
Right on. So basically, your corporate wellness retreats that we discussed may actually turn into, instead of raises, you may get an acid tab or two. No, but seriously, I think this is kind of that I was getting into is, do you ever worry that corporate world will turn in psychedelics into the next, pumpkin spice latte, or if you even dare, cannabis in early 2010s?
There's two things I worry about. One has like to do with the culture, the sort of like culture of elitism, what Burning Man has turned into. I've never been to Burning Man, but I used to want to go, but like now it just sort of seems to have turned into like this elitist competition to demonstrate your elitism. I think that's going to increase, whether it's people bragging about how much they did or how many they did or which ones they did or how many retreats they've gone on, or I went on a retreat with this one and I went on a retreat with that one. The sort of psychedelic tourism is already kind of a thing. I think that's going to increase and get worse. I mean, just look around at like how vapid society is. We see that getting exponentially worse. So that's one concern. But whatever, so what? People can do that if they want to. I don't have to participate in that aspect of the culture. They don't get to claim what psychedelics are and what psychedelic culture should be. If that's what they want to participate in, great, good for them, bravo. I can continue to participate in psychedelic culture in the ways that are fulfilling to me. That's wonderful. The other concern that I mentioned earlier has to do with the sort of pharmacalization of psilocybin, where they're just like completely stripping the phenomenology away, and all that's left and all that we're going to have access to is a pill that doesn't make you feel anything. It just, reduces your depression. Like microdosing. Not that there's anything wrong with microdosing, but like pharmaceutical companies are going to, create some derivative molecule that's essentially going to be a prescription microdose. But even if you took 20 of them, it's not going to make you trip because they remove whatever the psychedelic components are from it.
100%. And that was actually not going to be my next question, but something I did want to discuss with you. As someone who has tried microdosing in the past, outside of just like, the monthly full blown, let's escape reality for a second, let me dissolve whatever is going in my mind for a moment so that I can come out clear on the other end. As someone who has tried microdosing maybe 10, 15 times total, yeah, there is a euphoria that comes along with that. There is a sense of clarity that comes along with it. But once again, I think that also ties back into the entourage effect. Are we going to drug it down to the point where you get this single pill that you take every single day that is so minutely related to the benefits of the entire fruit itself that you could receive doing it at home versus, once again, just doing it at home alone?
Right, and I think microdosing, especially as an alternative to a tropic or an SSRI that maybe wasn't that effective or maybe produced some pretty nasty side effects, can be a perfectly viable alternative. But how reliant is the person on the microdosing as opposed to like using the microdose to like enhance the other parts of your life? If after work all you're doing is like watching 4 hours of TV and going to bed, I don't know that the fact that you took 0.25 grams of psilocybin that morning necessarily is going to benefit your life over the long term. So I think that one of the problems in our culture is that we're just overly reliant on like external medicine to solve all of our problems. I just don't want to feel bad. I don't want to change anything. I just don't want to feel bad. So, yeah, is microdosing probably safer and like less toxic in the body than a lot of psychotropic meds? Yeah, probably. But is just taking a little bit of psilocybin every day going to profoundly change somebody's life? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical.
I think to your point though, people are uncomfortable feeling uncomfortable, right? We're in this world now where there's a pill for literally everything and anything that you can imagine. So if Big Pharma has any control on that, they're absolutely going to push us to take a pill every 12 hours to dissolve that feeling or that emotion that we're having. But I think where this alt medicine helps is that it does the exact opposite, right? It makes you sit with your emotions, but in a state of mind where you can digest that and feel that and work through that. And I think that's something that Big Pharma they just can't recreate.
Yeah, and that's not really the paradigm that Western medicine operates from. It's just about symptom alleviation.
100%.
How does psychedelic integration compare with more traditional mindfulness or meditation practices that you already use with your patients today?
Well, I mean, again, it's like it's part of it. It's not necessarily separate from it. For somebody doing psychedelic integration after a psychedelic experience, meditation is something that helps them remember and connect to the experience, then yeah, that's absolutely something that should be part of their psychedelic integration. Not just for the purposes of therapy, but like for the purposes of continuing to benefit their lives. So psychedelic integration isn't only one thing. It can be any number of things, including what are some of the ways that might help you stay connected to whatever it was that was opened up in you during your psilocybin experience. If somebody struggling with their Christian faith had a profound experience of psilocybin, maybe integration for them is going back to church on Sundays. So it's not just necessarily like a specific school of practice. It's about whatever it is that's going to help that person remember and return to whatever it was that was benefiting them about the psychedelic experience.
That's the beauty of everything that you just said. One of the most profound trips I've ever had led me to believing that I wanted to be a teacher, like a high school teacher. I've been selling cars for 4 years at this point when I had this trip, making six figures plus, and And after a trip, I was like, dude, I'm going to be a teacher, a high school teacher. That's what I want to do. And yes, that's where, as David will probably tell you, you might have some thoughts that you want to bring into fruition that are probably not worth bringing into fruition. But at the same time, is I learned something from that experience. I learned that yes, while maybe I don't want to be a high school teacher, I would love to better the people that I can better in this world, whether that's in the sales floor, whether that's teaching a salesperson to be a better salesperson than I've ever been, whether that's being the guy that coaches somebody into being the best version of themselves that they can be. That's what I got out of that. And I think that just like you said, going to church or whatever it is, it's different for everybody. It's as long as that's what you want out of that, I think grasping that, holding on to it, figure out. Sometimes those trips are going to tell you weird things like be a high school teacher. But hey, figure out what that meant about being a high school teacher. Because to me, it meant being somebody that can coach others into being their best physical self
Sure.
and mental self for them.
And that's a perfect example of integration. How do you integrate this sort of epiphany? Oh, I should be a high school teacher. Well, maybe it doesn't literally mean become a high school teacher. Maybe it means learn ways to give back or learn ways to be involved in coaching or teaching. For somebody else, that epiphany might be real. Maybe they should become a high school teacher. Just like don't quit your job the day after you wake up from your psilocybin trip. You know what I mean? Let's be curious. Let's explore the possibility. Let's, think about it. What would the next step be? If in 3 months from now you continue to feel called to make this change, all right, maybe you start taking classes in the evening, get caught up on your gen eds so you don't have to quit your job right away. So it's not about necessarily whether or not how true the message is as much as it is like, just don't necessarily make any profound life changes right away.
Exactly. I could not have said that better because that was, like I said, one of the most profound trips of my own. And I face dove into that shit. I started studying for the GACE, which is the Georgia, whatever, basically the credentials that you need to become a teacher in the state of Georgia for someone like myself who does have a bachelor's degree, however, not in teaching. So that was, I mean, I face dove into that, man. I was at work selling cars, printing off the test questions so that I could go home and study them. And like I said, I think it was me overacting on a trip, and I think that that's why I love what you just said is like, hey, don't necessarily just face dive into it, but think about it. Think about what it means for you. What exactly? Yeah, mine was high school teacher, and I still think that that would be really cool to do, but it's not my life calling. It's not the calling for me. It's not what's going to make my life different, which is what I'm looking for is that next step for my own self. But I did learn that coaching, that teaching somebody, that all of these things, making that fulfillment in myself to better somebody else is something that I'm after.
Yeah, I think that there's absolutely a danger, like we've discussed, in the sort of inflation, the impulsive, spontaneous decision to make drastic changes to your life. But there's also a real danger in dismissing or minimizing the profundity of a psychedelic experience. Like, let's take it seriously. Let's just go slow and try to figure out what it means and what the medicine might be telling you.
Absolutely. What's the dumbest misconception you've ever heard about psychedelics, Dave?
That it's just drugs. I can unpack that, but like,
yeah, you don't even have to elaborate on that
right,
if I'm being honest.
right.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
dead ass.
just
Like,
drugs. Like, what the hell does that even mean? What are even drugs?
no, I'm in the same boat.
So that's probably the dumbest. Or how about I got another one for you. This is one of the things that really inspired me to realize people in my profession don't know what the hell they're talking about. I was working, this is like my last like agency job before I just went into full-time solo practice. And, we would do case conferences. And somebody was presenting their case, and it was a college kid who had a bad trip, mushrooms and a lot of really strong weed, and he had a bad time. And the people in the room, my fellow clinicians, the prevailing sentiment was like, Man, I don't even know why anyone would be messing around with that stuff. And just people like snickering and kind of making fun of this kid for being stupid and silly by wanting to experiment with psilocybin. And I spoke out because I'm pretty outspoken. And I basically said, none of you have any idea what the hell you're talking about. Shame on you. That's completely unfair. So that is also, the stupidest misconception that I've ever heard.
Well, also, it's
Absolutely.
ironic, right? Because you're taking a bunch of prescription medication to just push down the side effects of the symptoms that you're feeling, and you're okay with that, but you're not okay with the salt medicine that can really benefit you and go a level deeper.
Right. But they don't know. They don't understand.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah. And it's not just the medication. It's like there's a lot of therapists who their orientation in therapy is, my job is to help my clients feel better. I don't think that's right. I think my job is to help my clients develop a greater capacity to feel.
I think that's a great perspective of it.
And that's just it, as someone, once again, running back to kind of the beginning of this episode, is someone who has dealt with SSRIs at the age of 12 years old, guys. 12 years old on SSRIs. I felt numb for so long in my life, to the point where just 3 years ago, I feel like I can be myself. So yeah, don't judge the guy that's looking to try to finally feel himself. Hell, at least he's not cutting his wrist trying to do it, because been there, done that, and that shit doesn't work either. So hell yeah, dude. I appreciate that sentiment of that. For real. It just, once again, as our degenerates are listening, be safe about this shit, guys. Be safe. That's all I gotta say. Have a trip sitter. It ain't gonna be Dave. It ain't gonna be me. Have a friend sit there with you.
Yes.
A true friend.
And know what you're doing, at least to the extent that you can, and at least in terms of like knowing what substance you're taking, and knowing what the right dosage should be, and knowing what kind of experience you're trying to cultivate. I had a client once who, against my recommendations, you know what I mean? It's not like my clients actually listen to me. They're going to do what they're going to do. And he was being very, I don't want to say reckless. That's not fair, because he was very intentional about what he was doing. But I think he was being very responsible, and he was like crossing the streams, to quote Ghostbusters. He was taking LSD and then listening to Icaros, which is the music that the ayahuasca shamans play to foster and facilitate an ayahuasca trip. There's nothing at all that indicates that this is a good idea. And he had his poor wife, who had no idea about any of this stuff, being his trip sitter. So he's writhing in agony on the rug. She's freaking out. And I'm like, what are you doing? Have an understanding of the type of experience you're trying to cultivate.
If someone listening right now is curious but terrified, what is one piece of advice that you would give them?
Good?
Well, any.
Like, no, that would be my advice. I'm curious about psychedelics, but I'm terrified. My advice would be good. Like, you should be. And you don't need to necessarily run from that. You need to learn how to embrace that and move forward slowly and carefully in the face of your terror, and learn how to welcome it as part of the experience. It's not about, you're not going on the roller coaster where only in the freakest of circumstances are you actually in danger. You might actually be in danger, but this idea that you get to have a profound, life-changing experience alongside a guarantee of safety does not make sense to me in any way whatsoever. Part of the reason that makes an adventure so profoundly life-changing is that it's not safe. So, good. Be terrified, but let's figure out how to continue moving forward.
Holy shit. Actually, how many times have I said bomb down that hill on the longboard at 30 miles an hour, or go on that mountain drive, or let's jump off the top of this mountain into the hippie hole in friggin' Little River Canyon. Like, live your life, man. And with all due respect, within real terms of what is life or death, obviously if it is death, don't do it. But if it's scary, like, fucking jump, dude. Fuck it. Go for it.
Right, but if you're gonna, bomb the hill on your longboard, wear a helmet. If you're gonna jump off the cliff into the swimming hole, maybe, paddle around down there beforehand and make sure there's no debris, or the river's not a whole lot drier than it was last summer and you don't have 20 feet to plunge into. Like, be smart. But yeah, eventually you're gonna have to jump.
And maybe what you're trying to get to at that point is start small.
Well, I mean, starting small, I think, is part of being careful. But then again, access to medicine is difficult. So if somebody is only able to get, 3.5, 5 grams of psilocybin, they might not necessarily have enough to both dibble dabble and then have enough left over for like a profound full dose. So start small, metaphorically, before we're talking about specific dosage.
Exactly. No, I can't wait for Ryan to hear this. My brother, by the way, 20-year Marine veteran, finally able to live his own life, and I can't wait for him to hear this.
And for all the politicians out there who need a reason to support considering psychedelic medicine being beneficial, I mean, how many veterans a day need to take their own lives before we realize something ain't working? Like, it's enough already.
Thank you. I literally have no words to say other than thank you. That one kind of hit hard to home for me. But guys, finally, if mushrooms could talk, what would they say about us as a species? Legitimately, come on.
I would think they might say, like, oh, you poor humans. Like, it doesn't have to be this hard. How have you let things go so far afield? Come back to us. We're here to help. We love you.
So it wouldn't be stop making us into pizza toppings?
No, I don't think they mind the way that they're consumed.
Sorry, I had to throw that one in. No, I agree. So, and this is, I mean, truthfully, wrapping it up, this is the question I had for you, Dave. So what is all of this about humans and mushrooms with the DNA between us? You probably know more about this than I do. You know where I'm getting at with this?
I mean, kinda. I just think it speaks to how little we really know about the nature of our world and the nature of our reality. We know very little about the brain. We know even less about consciousness. And I think we know even less about how the brain and consciousness interface. So, and then you add something as bizarre as psilocybin to the mix, or any of the other psychedelic substances. Like, why do they even have this effect in the first place? Why do we even have the receptors in our brains that allow us to have this experience? So there is just, rather than trying to make any claims about what it all actually means, I think it's enough to say we don't really have any idea, and we should kind of learn to embrace the sort of majesty and the mystery of all of the things that we still don't know. And we don't have to find out. Like, some things can just be a mystery.
I love that idea at the end there too, because I mean that's just it. It's like the whole let's fully legalize psilocybin as a medicine. Okay, and then what? Like, where does that leave? I mean, we've even hinted at portions of this in our last hour of speaking, but it is weird. Like, let it be what it is. I fully agree with that. I mean, I wish it were easier for people to get coming back to the idea of like whether it's free therapy or psilocybin is just no longer criminalized. I agree with that sentiment. But at the same time, it's like kind of in a sense, let it be what it is, because it works. I just wish it could work a little bit better, if I'm being honest, for people's access, I should say.
Right. And I also think another common misconception is the single use profound change. Like, that doesn't always happen. There does seem to be sort of a cumulative effect that maybe it's like your third, fourth, fifth, eighth trip that like is really the one that like, whoa, really opens your eyes and allows you to sort of realize something new. So this idea that all you got to do is take it once and your life has changed forever, just, I mean, it happens, sure, happens plenty, but certainly doesn't always happen.
I think you're entirely wrong, if I'm being honest. I think that one trip leads you into taking the second, third, fourth, fifth, eighth trip.
Sure.
And that's why that one trip is life changing.
Sure.
Ashley may attest to this. Ashley thinks that I'm degenerate. Ashley, after this whole conversation, what have you got to say about my personal death with psilocybin? Anything that you want to add before we wrap it up?
I think that out of all of this, I'm most excited to see where science takes us. As a science major, and for for anyone who's wanting to go in this world of alt medicine, specifically psilocybin, we need to know more about it. We need to know how we can help the people the best. Right now, we're guessing in a lot of ways. I think that with the decriminalization, with the legislation changing, if it does, we need more studies to be able to help more people. With that, there are downfalls, and we're aware of that, and hopefully it doesn't go that way. But I'm excited to see what it can do for people like you, Andy, for people who are struggling, for people who need that. It's great that we can do what we can do now, but what can the future of science do for us? What can it uncover?
I think that if people are doing like qualitative studies, that counts.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that like anecdotal evidence isn't real data, I think it just isn't true. So yeah, let's do some like very well designed studies, but maybe the data that they're measuring is more qualitative rather than, you circled 10 last week and 9 this week, and that's a 1-point increase. Like maybe that's not the type of data that's going to be beneficial, but there can still absolutely be robust scientific studies, longitudinal studies, cross-sectional studies, like big population numbers for these studies. Let's get a lot of data and a lot of anecdotal evidence so that it can actually be deemed scientifically valid.
100%. It doesn't have to be the data that we see today with Big Pharma, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's what we need because we are not a guinea pig, a science experiment. There's more to it than just that, and I think we're learning that. But no, this was so informative and so helpful to see it from your point of view. Thank you so much, David.
Very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, let's give it up for David, guys. This guy is a full-blown professional and took his time to hang out with a bunch of degenerates today. David, you got anything that you want to share with us closing out here?
No, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity. I really think, again, my role in all of this is really trying to get as much good information out there to as many people as I can. And I really believe that changes things. So commend the two of you for inviting me, and thank you again. If people want to follow up with me, if people hear this, you could email me. I can leave my email address, davidschwartztherapy@gmail.com. Last name is kind of tricky to figure out, but if you're so motivated, you'll find me.
Absolutely, David. I couldn't appreciate any of this any more than I do, honestly. So thank you for coming in for this. I'm glad that we turned an episode that was going to be a 2-segment thing in a full-blown episode into a full-blown episode of itself. This is honestly the coolest thing I could have imagined it being. So thank you, David, for your time today. All right, degenerates, there it is. Full-blown professional here talking about psychedelics. So if you got any more questions, hit us up. Of course, you can reach us at degeneratedialogues.com. That was also David at davidschwartztherapy@gmail.com. If you have any, wanting to reach out on that behalf. But other than that, guys, stay weird, stay reckless, and for the love of God, get a trip sitter.
And that's a wrap on the interview. 1 hour and 20 minutes of sheer brilliance, buried under the glorious sound of cats and static. Just another day in the Degenerate Dialogue Circus.
Big thanks to David S. Schwartz for putting up with us. Dude came from therapy talk, left with tinnitus.
Support the show so we can finally afford audio equipment that wasn't salvaged from a Radio Shack funeral sale.
This has been Degenerate Dialogues, where the only thing louder than our guests is the cats knocking over microphones.
Stay weird, stay reckless, and maybe send us some catnip as hazard pay.